I'm Carmine Gallo, talking leadership with Joel Peterson. He is the author of Entrepreneurial Leadership, also chairman of JetBlue, a Stanford business professor, and founder of Peterson Partners, an investment management firm. Joel, so good to have you here. Although these are strange times, aren't they? We're both under quarantine in our states.
Exactly. We're sitting in our home studios, but great to be with you, Carmine.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you. Joel, you have taught Stanford business students for 25 plus years now. If you were holding class today, remotely, not in person, but if you're holding class today, what are you telling business students? What would you be telling them about the times we're in?
Well, I would say something like Churchill had said about the times that he was in, that these are our greatest times too. Times of adversity actually test your character. You can build great cultures, great relationships. They present challenges, but they're great for building teams and building companies and understanding things that you wouldn't otherwise understand.
Joel, you have a whole chapter on overcoming adversity, which I love. We'll get into some of the other chapters as well. But you have this chapter on overcoming adversity. So let me pick it up from there. You have experience in an industry that is facing unprecedented adversity, airline and travel industry. How should leaders in the industries facing the most serious headwinds today communicate with employees, customers, partners, and stakeholders? What do those leaders especially need to keep in mind?
Well, the first thing they need to do is confront reality. I mean, times are bad. Things look grim. There are changes that need to be made. People need to conserve cash. If you're out of cash, you're out of business. And so people need to understand what the lay of the land is. And then I think they need to communicate before, during, and after events. And they need to communicate bad news every bit as much as they communicate good news. So leaders love to communicate good news. They're all quite voluble when it comes to something good happening, but they really need to be equally disclosive and maybe even more so, more transparent when things are bad.
Let's talk about that. Let me pick up on that because in chapter 5 of Entrepreneurial Leadership, you have an entire chapter devoted to communication skills and leadership communication. Joel, I think you make a good point. Yeah, leaders find it easy to communicate when times are good. Sales are up, the company is flush with cash. Now we're in turbulent times. Anxiety is high, businesses are crashing, markets are down, and uncertainty is rampant. People do not like uncertainty. Joel, specifically, how should a good communicator verbalize and communicate today? How should a good leader communicate in a time of crisis?
Well, I think the first thing to do is realize that people know that times aren't good. There's no point in trying to sugarcoat something that isn't good. So to me, I think once you recognize what you're dealing with, there's something about a reality check that's important. But then I think you can be optimistic. You know, people have been through tough times before. We've faced adversity. Americans are innovative, they're creative, they're hardworking. We will generate solutions. We'll come up with new ideas. We'll be innovative. We'll be flexible. We'll make decisions and we'll make them in timely fashion. And if they're wrong, we'll change them as information emerges. So I think there's a lot to be optimistic about.
Let's pick up on that, Joel, because I've struggled with this. You're an optimist, are you not?
I am.
I know you are. As am I. Every entrepreneur, every great leader who I've interviewed, who I've worked with, is an optimist. How do we, as optimists, balance hope for a better future with the very real problems that we are experiencing today?
Well, I think the main thing that you have to do is you have to come up with a plan. What are the facts on the ground? What is reality? What is the market going to want in the future? How do you measure it? How do you solve problems for customers, for your employees? And you come up with plans. You create new, creative, innovative ways of responding to market needs. And I think as long as you're serving others and you're serving needs, there's a lot that can be done, even in this grim market. I'm on a board of another company that is providing free materials to families to teach in the home. So they just reached out to say, how can we do that? How can we create something of value for others? And it's bringing their whole team together. So you can remain optimistic in the face of daunting challenges.
Is there a danger of leaders being overly optimistic? Because I've noticed a little bit of a pushback, at least on social media, when I watch other leaders right now. People who are suffering don't want you as a leader to be Pollyanna. They want you to recognize reality as it is, but they're also looking for hope. And again, this gets back to one of the questions I've been asking, Joel, but gosh, that balance, it seems like a very delicate balance. I just read that wonderful book. I know you're a fan of Churchill, called The Splendid and the Vile.
I just read it too.
Oh,
Yeah.
terrific.
Yeah.
Great minds think alike. In fact, I just had a wonderful conversation with Eric Larson a couple of weeks ago.
Nice.
But there's a perfect example of someone who, while the bombs were falling, still was able to convey courage and hope and optimism, and yet identify reality on the ground. I think it's such a hard balance, though, is it not?
It's a very tough balance, but if you kind of get back to your thesis, which is how powerful communication is, Churchill weaponized the English language. You know, he made it into this powerful tool, and the people loved him. They followed him. People would be bombed out. They'd go back to these shelters, and they might not be able to, take care of a whole lot of things. And then they'd go to work the next day, and they had huge trust in him because he was at once realistic and optimistic. And he was deeply flawed in many ways as a leader, but he was the right man for the hour.
Exactly. I would be remiss in not asking you, since so many people love a brand that you're affiliated with. You're chairman of the board of JetBlue. Today is April 22nd, 2020. We're both under quarantine. How are we doing? How's the, obviously we know this is unprecedented crisis for the airline industry and travel in general. What can you tell us publicly about JetBlue?
Well, we've grounded a lot of planes. We have a lot sitting in our main cities, and then we have some that are parked in Arizona. So I would say that probably 90 to 95% of our flights have been canceled. It's very tough without revenues. We've had some help from the government, mostly to make sure that we don't have to furlough employees who would otherwise be getting unemployment insurance or whatever. So it's keeping them on the payroll, and it's preserving an industry. The whole industry could not survive all the groundings that have taken place. So we've got a bit longer runway, as it were. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, I think we've got to face the fact that people are going to travel in different ways. They're going to think differently. Safety is one of the principles of our brand. I think it's one of the main brand attributes, and we've got to be safe from a health standpoint too. So we're going to have to figure out ways to take people's temperature, to separate them a little more on the plane, to sanitize planes. People are going to want to fly smaller planes in all likelihood. Mm-hmm. So there's some changes that'll happen, but people will want to travel. So I'm very optimistic about, as great as this virtual world is, people are going to want to see family and friends. They're going to want to see places they can't see. And there are a lot of things we can't do in the virtual world. There's something about being with another person, reading body language, connecting, and certain meetings don't happen well this way. So people are going to travel again. And we've just got to figure out, how do we make sure that they're safe in this new world? That's
a wonderful thing to talk about, Joel, because I've thought that as well. We're all talking virtually. We're having these remote meetings. I get a lot of questions. Oh, how is this going to change meetings in the workplace? But it reflects a need, a real deep-seated need for emotional connection. So as human beings, there are still things that, because we are wired to be social and to be emotionally connected with others, those things aren't going to go away. We don't know how many months it'll take for recovery to kick in or how strong the recovery is. There's a lot of uncertainty, but we are certain that human connection and those experiences are not going to disappear.
What is it they say, that 90% of all communication is nonverbal? I'm teaching a class now over Zoom, and I've got 49 postage stamp size faces on a computer screen, and they're all on mute. And I'm trying to communicate with them, and I'll say something that I think is funny to dead silence. And it's just not the same as having them in a classroom where you interact and there's all this banter that goes on. There's a different kind of learning that happens. We need that as humans.
Absolutely. Finally, Joe, you say in entrepreneurial leadership, let's talk about this specifically. You say that the world needs more entrepreneurial leaders. Let's be specific. You're not talking about just founders of companies, are you? You're talking about a mindset that applies to all leaders.
Exactly. And I think even more now, in this environment, I think all leaders are going to have to be entrepreneurial. They can't just be presiders sitting in a corner office. They can't just be managers of complexity, administrators of policy, or politicians. They have to have this element of being innovators and being able to manage the innovation. Many entrepreneurs can light fires, but they can't keep them lit. And so I think the entrepreneurial leader is somebody who can create durable change and manage it. So what I've tried to do in this book is give people a map, a series of maps and checklists that they can go through and say, boy, I now know how to sell, to negotiate, to run meetings, to hire people, to fire people, and to do all these things the way that an entrepreneurial leader creates value. And I think we need it more now than ever.
I love this book, Entrepreneurial Leadership. And let's not forget your first book.
It's more relevant now than ever.
The 10 Laws of Leadership, right? Oh, terrific. Well, thank you so much, Joel. It's a pleasure to speak with you again. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk soon.
Great to be with you, Carmine. Thanks.